Hi, I'm Gina, creator and host of Feminine-Raodmap podcast, the podcast that is designed to have real talk around all things midlife and strategies to help us live a more vibrant second half. It is my deepest desire to help other people shift the conversation toward empowerment, toward vibrancy, toward excitement about what life has for us and what we can bring to the world, how we can each individually shine our light. So I invite you to grab a cup of something wonderful, to join me each week or when you can, and join me in my living room to have these conversations. And if you are enjoying this, please take the time to subscribe wherever you listen, rate my podcast, and share the episodes that help you, the episodes that encourage you. Let's build this community together. Welcome to my tribe. I'm so grateful you're here. Hello, Feminine Roadmappers. Welcome back to Feminine Roadmap Podcast, the podcast that helps you navigate the challenges and changes of midlife and teaches you and helps you live a more vibrant second half. Today, my guest is going to tell us about her journey of how she lost 150 pounds naturally with a decidedly undiet-like philosophy by harnessing the power of the next right choice. She shares how she finally made peace with a lifetime of food addiction. My guest today is Amy Freinberg-Trufas. She's the author of Food, Eat with Ease Every Day. Amy, thank you so much for being on the show today.
I am absolutely delighted to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. I was telling you before we hit record that I haven't had this conversation, believe it or not, in 5 years. So I'm excited to have you on to talk about your own weight loss journey and how you did that, because I think a lot of people do struggle with food addiction. I have family members who do struggle with food addiction. So I'm excited to hear your story. So why don't you let me and my audience know a little bit about yourself and what your journey was about? How did it start and how did you lose that weight naturally?
My story is similar to, I'm sure, many people who find themselves very, very overweight. From a very young age, I mean, even in my kindergarten photos, I was overweight. It got to the point where I was clinically diagnosed as morbidly obese. And I remember very distinctly the day when the doctor said to me, "You're morbidly obese, and you know morbid, that means death. So, this is bad and you have to lose weight." And I also tell people that if I count every pound I've gained and lost as one, I've lost and gained over 1,000 pounds in my lifetime. I finally stopped weighing myself, gave up, stopped checking when I hit 311 pounds. I remember the day I was wearing a size 4X beach cover-up as a t-shirt, and my back was hurting. And I remember getting home from spending time with my friend, and I stepped on the scale and it said 311. And I felt absolutely hopeless. I did not have any idea how I could ever lose weight. And I have to say, in that moment, part of me just gave up, because I'd lost weight only to fail and gain it back and then some. And this then some part ends up, tracking over time to a consistently heavier weight than I was last year and heavier than the year before and so forth. So part of me was thinking, geez, I'm better off not even trying, and maybe I'll stay the same at least. And then the other part was like, you know what? I would talk to my internal dialogue with myself was absolutely destructive when it came to weight. I had good friends. I was bright. I held down my jobs really well. My coworkers liked me. It was just this one piece of my life that I could never figure out. And my internal dialogue would be very abusive. You're a fat loser. You'll never figure this out. You're meant to be fat. Constant berating of that part of me that was grappling with weight. So my story was really born out of trauma. And I was raised by an alcoholic mom who was abusive to me and herself. And my job as the child was to cover it up because my family was prominent. And that was seriously my job. And I knew it. No one actually ever sat me down and said, your job is to cover up your mother's alcoholism. But it was very much spoken like, we're a good family. Good families don't do this. And it would be like, we can't go today. Mom's not feeling well. And everybody knew, the crazy thing is, Gina, is my sisters and I didn't even talk about it with each other. That's how secret it was. We all just told the line. So I was the last of 6 kids. They all moved out. There was a big gap between me and my nearest sibling. So I was at home a lot alone with my mother. And that's when she became really severe. I mean, I found her as a child with suicide attempts, bleeding out in the bathtub, very, very severe alcoholism. And the Amy that witnessed all that, and the Amy that held it together, and the Amy that kept the secret, and the Amy that went to school and got decent grades, because again, we're from a good family, and held it all together, it dawned on me one day, she wasn't bad or broken having reached for food. She was brilliant. And Gina, I can tell you in that moment, I get goosebumps saying that to you now, because it was such a shift for me to think back on young Amy, young overweight Amy, with this amazing secret, and her job is to hold it together. And what did she reach for when she was running against the wall? Well, she didn't have siblings at home. She didn't have a parent she could talk to. She reached for food over and over and over and over. And there's a brilliance in that, because I really feel today that if 10-year-old Amy didn't figure out how to cope, I wouldn't be here to make a new choice. And that's what I'm all about. Right now, standing where I am, I'm here to make a new choice. And that's the piece that shifted everything for me.
The power of choice. It's interesting, Amy, in a different context, yesterday with a coaching client, we were talking about the power of choice. And what I was talking to my client about, which really resonates with what you're saying right now, is instead of beating ourselves up, vilifying ourselves, demeaning ourselves when we've made a choice that maybe isn't in congruence with the best version of ourselves, whatever that is in our mind, there's a accepting, understanding. It's like, yes, I made that choice. Yes, I am where I am. What is my next better choice? It's a decision away, sort of one step at a time, isn't it?
Absolutely is. And I actually took that one step further. Mm-hmm. I didn't just neutralize the choice that 10-year-old overweight Amy made. I thanked her. Thank you for getting me through. Mm-hmm. And boy, being grateful to that part of me that thought she was really screwing everything up, to instead shift that into gratitude, because that little girl figured out how to get through her mother bleeding out in a bathtub. When I think back on that now, having a child of my own, and this was back in the day when alcoholism was a very dark thing. People hid it. There wasn't, my town didn't have an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. You can get one now, but back then they didn't. And put that on top of, it's the wife of, a well-loved person in the community. And holy mackerel, it's a quote unquote shame on the family. Well, mm-hmm. My mom needed help. She didn't get it. She never got the help she needed, and that when I think back on that, that's a whole thread that the two of us share. I feel so grateful that I was able to step out of my pattern and make a new choice, because she never did. She never did. And the other thing that I'll just say, because this is kind of cool, is that, for years I had feelings toward my mom that were sort of, not loving. I had an animosity to her. Why did you put me through this? Why were you drinking? Why? Well, having gone through now the path that I've gone through, where I also had an addiction. Mine happened to be reaching for food to numb the feelings. She was reaching for alcohol to numb the feelings. Somewhere in the process of writing my book, I realized, oh my God, it's the same path. And in that moment, that recognition that we shared this huge similarity, I could only feel forgiveness for her, because for the first time in my life, I got completely what she was going through. And I could only love her. because she suffered and she didn't ultimately get help. So it's, the book was a gift in so many ways, because in writing down my experience, after the fact, I could almost re-experience it and reflect on each little piece. And then again, to your point, make a new choice. Do I want to feel like the victim of an alcoholic mom? Or is there a different choice I can make today? So choice is everything. And if you boil that down to a wellness plan, whether you're trying to get more steps in, or whether you're trying to shift into a different collection of food that you want to eat, the power of the next right choice for me, and by right, I mean aligned to whatever you're trying to achieve. The power in that moment, first of all, recognizing the moment where you say, I used to do things on autopilot and now I want to try to do something new. So you have that awakened moment where you realize, oh, this is where I used to make maybe a trauma response and grab for a bag of chips. Okay, I just recognized that I have a feeling that I want to numb with food. What can I do instead? And once I made space around that moment of that realization of what my habit used to be, Gina, I can tell you that's when I started to really be able to shift things in an intentional way. And I felt so empowered. But I did it for the first time in my life with a true kindness for myself. And I think that's what the difference was.
It's that, I guess, a different way of saying what I was thinking. It's like somehow we think by telling ourselves we're bad, we're horrible, we're failing, we're a loser. There's this weird idea that we're going to beat ourselves into submission to the thing that we want, right? And It never works. And I think I hear you saying it's turning and facing, like you said, that little version of yourself and really honoring that journey, accepting that this was what it was, right? And that's so huge because there's a gentleness to that and there's a grace. There's a gentleness and a grace to that as opposed to that heavy-handed disciplinary way that we treat ourselves when we fail, whatever that is to you. Do you know what I mean? We all have different versions of what failure is. And I do appreciate that part of your journey, which it's not just about the weight. It was that emotional side of really what you did go through and what your mom went through, how that impacted you. It's a bit therapeutic probably because the weight is so directly connected to that trauma, isn't it?
Absolutely, yes. When I think of myself at 311 pounds, mindlessly eating when feelings came up, I was on sort of a self-fulfilled path of not being able to break my own habit. Believe me, I was in emotional and physical pain. I was saying no when I was invited places. I was made fun of when I would go places. 20 years ago, body size acceptance wasn't even a thing. Now we see all over social media, people of all shapes and sizes being celebrated as beautiful. And I love that, but that was not my experience. I remember being at a local fair, and there was a well-known 1950s star singing on a county fair stage, and he asked for heavy people to come up on stage and dance, and people were literally pushing, pulling, and shoving me on to be made fun of on a stage. It was a nightmare. So I eventually stopped going out. I didn't feel safe going places, not only for me, but what about the people that are with me? Maybe I'll get them hurt. These are the things I would think all over my weight, all around my weight. So that sort of sadness, loneliness, feeling of failure, feeling of not being acceptable was numbed more by food. So I was in such a loop of it, but I wasn't aware. I wasn't fully connected nor aware of what I was actually doing. I just, as soon as a feeling came up, boom, eat. And that would be happy, sad, frustrated, stressed, worried, concerned, you name it. My go-to habit was to grab something to eat. At times now it still happens, but what's shifted is more often than not, I have the awareness around the urge. And in that urge is that moment I try to create. I take a couple deep breaths. I try to really connect with what's the feeling I really have. Am I stressed? Am I thirsty? Am I frustrated? Do I need to take a walk? Am I angry? There's a whole invitation there to experience what your real emotion is in that moment, that I used to just grab food, stick something in my mouth, and I'd be distracted and I wouldn't have to have that feeling. So it was a call for me to develop things in myself that I hadn't developed. And it was all born, I love the word grace that you used. It was all born from that moment where I was like, you know what? I am done suffering around food. I have to create something new here, and it's not going to be suffering. It's not going to be punitive. I'm not going to punish myself with either exercise nor food. I'm not going to starve myself, because I'd done all these things and none of it worked. So my first step was just to give myself the grace to be patient. That's another thing we could talk about for a whole hour, just the strength of being patient. Because I think, like, when you want something and you really realize, you know what, now it's my time and I'm going to make this happen. I want it now. I'm not terribly patient. Okay, hey, I decided, let's have it. I'll put it out to the universe. Let's have it right now. I'm ready. Well, something like a major weight loss is not a now kind of thing. It's a every moment kind of thing. So the ability to grant myself the patience to take one step at a time and accept that. How about accepting that I didn't know what I was doing? That was huge as a grown woman in her midlife that usually can figure things out. I did not know what to do. So there was a lot of peeling back. There was a lot of getting down to raw emotion. And there was a lot of trying to just sit with that for a moment and then give myself, I love your word, grace, to make a new choice. And that choice I would try to align with what I wanted for myself the best I could.
It's such a compassionate journey, isn't it?
Yes. And that was the first time I was compassionate with myself. And I love that too, because I was compassionate with all the versions of myself that even got me to be 311 pounds. Those Amy's didn't need my hate. Those Amy's needed my love.
You talk about awareness, and that is absolutely when I walk through a journey with someone as a coach. It's the awareness is the very first step. We are unable to shift or change anything we're unaware of. And it seems so obvious, but, awareness is the key to the shift. And I think there's a lot of fear that people feel around that. They don't really want to know what they kind of already know, it seems like, because it can be scary. I know someone very close to me who said, I don't want to turn and face any of that to deal with it because I'll start to cry and I'll never stop. The fear of the thing that's already happened, but facing the layers, facing the impact. And I think there's grieving in all of that too, isn't there?
Definitely. And there has to be a level, in addition to the grieving, there has to be a level of self-forgiveness, because what I grieved for was the years that I spent saying no because of how I didn't feel I could go out into the world. Yeah. I also had to forgive myself for that. The other thing I think, that I want to share now is I can't tell you how many times I've read something that's telling someone who's ready to make a big change in their life, whatever that is. And they say, oh, all you have to have is self-love to get started. Yeah. What about those of us who don't feel an ounce of self-love for ourselves? How do we get started? If I waited for self-love, I'd weigh 400 pounds and I'd be crying in the corner of my kitchen right now because I didn't have it. I couldn't manufacture it. And I wasn't even going to BS myself and pretend that I could, because at least I was going to be honest with myself. So how do you take that first step when you don't feel self-love? These are things I didn't even ask myself this. I was just void of self-love. How could I love myself when I let myself go so far? And my outside was so out of whack of who I was on the inside. The bigger I grew outside, the more I shrunk inside. So how do I love that? Yuck. That's not lovable. That's horrible. She's stolen my life. she's made it so I can't even go to a restaurant without getting made fun of. Forget if it's a buffet. Don't send me up to the buffet line with a plate. All eyes are on me and I know it. What am I going to put on that plate to keep myself looking the way I look? So I guess what I'm trying to say is I had a ton of baggage. None of them had the label self-love on it. So what grew as a result of my figuring out, my desperate clawing to figure out what new things could I try that were in line with me trying to be happy. That's all I was shooting for. What can I do to so I can say yes and try to be happy and like show up the way I want to show up? And more than anything, start to find peace. Because when I thought about food, it was a real source of angst. What am I going to eat? When am I going to have it? It was just way too much real estate for me. And it was a constant spinning about food in my head. I was so tired of that and I wanted peace. I just wanted peace. So when I started the journey of, like you said, pulling the layers back one at a time, being curious, allowing myself to be patient, figuring out that all those former versions of myself were not hate-worthy people. They really just wanted love and needed love. And then, thinking about current day me hugging 10-year-old me, which, believe me, that was a cry fest, but it needed to happen. I had to connect to that part of me that went through all that stuff and just, it never got addressed. I just carried that on my back, through my whole adult life. So long story short, what happened as a result of each of those choices and each of those intentions to be patient with myself, to be curious with myself, to try and see what kinds of foods I could eat, to buy a pair of sneakers and try to walk around my block, to say yes to a friend who asked me to walk with her. Every time I did one of those things, I got a little bit closer to my happiness. And somewhere along the line, I realized that what I was developing for myself was what I call this corset of self-love. Just the way a physical corset holds your body together and your back together. I tried to develop something internal that felt like an internal corset to hold my being together. If we're all walking around in this meat suit and we have this soul or the spirit inside of us, how do I shore my spirit up so that she feels safe and happy and able to step out the way she wants? Finally, at the end of it, what developed was what I call this self-love, which that's what came as a result of the journey. So you don't have to have it to take the first step, but I guarantee you through each step, you'll put a little bit more in that jar of self-love, one little coin at a time. And then at some point you're like, hey, I'm all right. And boy, what a feeling that is.
I love that each step in the right direction is putting a coin in the jar of self-love. And we're so quick to be critical and so slow to have compassion on ourselves. And an excuse doesn't count as compassion. You know what I'm trying to express, right?
Yes.
Like, oh, well, I was a victim. Oh, well, this. Oh, well, that. Well, that's not compassion. That's just another layer of avoidance.
Right. It's another crutch.
It is. Yeah. It is. Those stories, while many of them are true, do become so much a part of our identity that they block us from the very growth we think or we might be looking for. We might think we're looking for it because let's be honest, Amy, when your life is basically an ongoing repetition of a trauma response, the path to freedom can be kind of traumatic in a different way. The healing journey is such worthy work. Not even just the weight loss, but the actual, like you said, shoring up your soul and finding that place. I just honor your journey because healing is, I think, probably underlying your success.
I think so too. And I think that's what made a huge difference of, why it stuck this time. Why was it sustainable? What was different this time than the other times when I, went on the Slim Fast diet and I lost weight and then I stopped and it all came back again. It was, for me, it was a congruence of things. It was many things that came together. And this didn't happen in a day, a week, a month, or even a year. This was a few-year journey for me, and it was a piece at a time. But it all started with one step. And I can just assure anyone listening, there are times when I still lean into the one next choice. And I can't underline enough how absolutely powerful and empowering that is to know. Because let's say you totally quote unquote screw up your eating for that day. I don't believe that happens, but let's say you go to a party, you have cake, you have some fried food, whatever that's not in wasn't in your plan, and you get frustrated with yourself. So what I used to do is, I'm going to punish myself by working out extra. I'm going to berate myself mentally for all the bad choices I made. And then I'm going to feel so bad about myself, I might have another bad day of eating and another bad day and say, you know what, screw it, I'm just going to sit on the couch. That circling the drain thing I used to do is what kept me away from being successful. When I boiled that all down to one choice, I didn't feel like I was in that quicksand of a decision. I felt like, you know what, actually, I really loved that cake. It was really good. I was present in the moment. It was a celebration. I'm not going to quote unquote punish myself by going to the gym, because that whole time I would be saying, oh, you're so fat, you got to get these calories off, you're such a loser, you can't do it. No, you know what, I'm just not going to do it today. I'll see how I feel when I wake up tomorrow. And then when I woke up tomorrow, I was like, oh yeah, it's just another choice. Let me have some oatmeal and let me go for a walk. I let all of that criticism and that harsh critic thing go, because she didn't have a positive role in any of the outcome that I was experiencing. So I kind of had to kick her to the curb and almost be forceful around it. Like, yeah, no, that is damaging to me. I know what works, and I'm going to stick into what works. And before I get overwhelmed, let me just think about one choice in this moment. Okay, what's my goal? My goal is to be happy. What's going to line up with that? I'll have a healthy breakfast and I'll go for a walk later. Bing. Stress was gone, punishment was gone. And for me, I had to have that level of peace in order to have this be sustainable. It had to make sense from a long-term perspective. And for God's sake, it had to be kind, because the unkindness from others and myself or my weight, I was done with it. I had plenty, and it was time to do something new.
Yeah, my husband and I were just talking about this, because I had a gentleman on, Benny Tortorich, and he was talking about no sugar, no grains. And my husband had been feeling kind of crummy, so he's kind of taken on that, giving that a shot. And then he's doing like a good, I told him 80% of the time, if you can do that, you're solid, because 100% is kind of unrealistic with most things, isn't it? And we were just talking about yesterday, I was talking, let's be honest. I was like, I had 2 cookies. I enjoyed the cookies. It was a choice that I made. I'm not on a diet or anything, but the conversation was, you had 2 street-sized taco tortillas. It's not a failure. Please stop saying, oh, I failed, or I made a mistake. I'm like, look, you get to choose what you eat.
Yeah.
If you want to have 2 tacos, at least enjoy the 2 tacos.
Oh my God. 100%. And by the way, if you're going to, totally. If I would, there'd be times when I would have a craving, like let's say a brownie, and I'd be like, okay, I think I'm craving a brownie. Here's my head. Brownie. You know what? Brownie's not good for me. So I'm going to have a granola bar. Okay. Granola bar, brownie. Okay. Brownie's not good for me. I'm going to have some almonds. So eat some almonds, brownie. If I had just eaten the damn brownie in the beginning, I would have probably saved all the calories of all the quote unquote good stuff that I ate to try to distract myself from wanting the brownie. And hello, all I wanted was the brownie. So at some point I realized a couple of bites of a brownie is totally fine. I mean, in all honesty, I didn't sit down and eat like a whole giant one, because my tastes changed over time. I just wanted a couple bites to have that chocolate hit and feel like I think it's about control and trusting myself too. When I'm thinking back on that, I trust myself that I can eat something that I used to think was forbidden or bad. I can eat it in peace. I'm going to stay present and enjoy it. I'm going to know when I'm done and put my fork down, and I'm going to be okay afterward. Wow.
That's huge, because the people in my life who struggle, they've said to me, I remember a gal at church said to me one time, if I have one chip, I have to eat the whole bag of chips.
Yep.
And I've always thought, there's a difficulty, Amy, because food we need.
Yes.
It's not like drugs and alcohol, which is outside of your necessity. You can live without those, but you can't live without food. And I'd love to have you kind of encourage my audience, because food addiction is challenging because you have to eat. Absolutely. And how did you shift so that you could have a healthy relationship with food? That you just shared one, and it's that trust of yourself and learning to be present. Those are the lessons that I heard you saying. It's like, eat the brownie, just eat enough to satisfy and honor that and enjoy it, is what I'm hearing you say.
That's exactly what I did, because the brownie that lived in my head calling me that I wasn't eating had way too much attention. So I said, you know what? I'm going to diffuse this right now. This brownie's not going to take up this much mental real estate. Let's see, brownie, what you're all about. Put delicious brownie on the plate, cut it, I think, into quarters. And I was like, let's see what this is. Again, patience, curiosity, and born out of, I didn't say, I never forgot my whole overlying thing, which is I'm going to be happy here. But right now, guess what? That brownie looks like happiness. So let me see how I can sort of get through this. Because if someone says to me, Amy, you're never going to have a piece of dark chocolate again in your life. And I actually had a trainer say that to me. I swear to you. She was like, well, if you're going to work out with me, you're never going to eat dark chocolate again. I was like, see ya. Like, let's not even pretend that that's reasonable. That's not. Nope. I'm literally left, because that sort of restriction is not going to work for me long term. I had to figure out how to be at peace with my cravings, with my desires. And I knew that I wanted to live in the real world, and the real world has chips and cookies and brownies and takeout food and pizza and wings. These are all things. Now, I can consciously choose how much, when, and if I want those things. But if someone tells me, you, Amy, because of who you are, you can't handle those things, that is not feeling acceptable to me. I needed to get to the place where I understood the nutrition that I was putting in my body on a much better basis. So I talked with a nutritionist to help me figure out, like, what is a carb? How does it work in the body? There's no user's manual. I had no idea. Why, your fat cells store carbs. No idea. Didn't know. Why is protein important? Why do you need protein after you walk and work out? So she helped me understand what role it is. And I'll tell you, I had another epiphany one day when I was pumping premium fuel in my tank and eating Cheez-Its.
Yep. You were like, fuel for fuel, pound for pound. Is this premium or is it junk? Right.
Right. And I realized at some point that I'm at some level a biological machine that needs a certain amount of good things in so that I can walk and I can work and I can sleep well and I can be healthy and I can feed my cells the kind of nutrition that they need. So there was an aspect of me learning about nutrition, but never, ever, ever again was I going to be restrictive around food, because I had done that and it didn't work. The whole, like, you, Amy, there's something really awful. And I don't know if I can articulate it, but there's a bad feeling when I think, like, I'm so out of control that I can't be trusted around chocolate. That's not okay for me. I needed to get to a place where I could be around anything. And I guess that's the ease part of the book, eat with ease every day. Once I got these pieces together, the craziness around food just fell away. And that was, I think, the biggest gift of all, that I had peace and I trusted myself, even if I did eat chocolate. And by the way, I probably have a little bit of dark chocolate, good quality, tiny bit of dark chocolate almost every day, because I really like it. I have it in the drawer, little tiny squares. I enjoy the heck out of it. I eat it slowly, tastes good. I like it. Mm-hmm. Not every day, but when I want it, it's there. Mm-hmm. But the point I guess I'm trying to make is there was a growing up around my response to reach for food. First of all, what I would do if I did reach for it, and just the realization that, you know what, every so often I want what people would consider to be a treat so that I can keep it together and be able to sustain this long term. And that's what it was for me. long-term choices that I can live like this. I don't even feel like I'm dieting. And in all honesty, I'm probably not dieting. I'm just eating in a way that reflects my goal, which is to be active and happy, be able to say yes to things and enjoy them.
I hear in food stories a lot of shame around the way a person looks, like you talked about the buffet line, feeling judged. And so how did you move past that shame and guilt? Where in your weight loss journey did you turn a corner with that? Was it at the beginning, or was it as you made each next best choice, you just slowly shed those things with the weight? Was it a correlation that way?
I think there definitely was a correlation. This is a great question, and I haven't ever thought about it before. But part of me, I have the intuitive feeling that the success is what started to blot out the shame. And I call this success, when in the book, I talk about this, but again, people will say, oh, you have to have motivation to make the choice. Well, and then, you have to have self-love to make the choice. No, I just flipped that whole script, and I didn't even do it on purpose. I just didn't have self-love. So I was like, all right, I got to take the next step. What's that going to be? And that was sort of patience and curiosity with myself to make a choice. And boy, there were times when I was really leaning in to that mental, okay, Amy, breathe through this. Don't give up. You got it. I had this beacon in my head, which was to find happiness and be free of this feeling. So I thought about that a lot in the beginning. And what developed there was sort of a little cycle where I made a choice. I saw some success. That success motivated me to make another choice. Another choice, success, motivation. So I had a little circle going of positive feedback from my body, from the choices I was making. So I said, oh my gosh, this is working. Hey, I feel pretty good. I'm eating food I like. I'm exercising. I'm feeling a little more solid in my body. I could kind of walk up the steps a little bit more quickly. I was noticing things. I was a little bit more pain-free. Those were all internal feelings. At some point, there's two sides of this whole, other people giving you their opinion about their body, like the stranger calling me fat in a store, whatever, or someone saying something like, wow, you look great. You lost a ton of weight. Well, that doesn't feel great either. So at some point, I sort of tuned all of the external opinion out. I had to, because you like me now that I'm thin more than before? Screw you. Kind of what I felt like that's, at some point I had to sort of turn the importance meter down on what other people thought. And I really paid more attention to what I thought. And what I was feeling and thinking at that time was, okay, Amy, I'm seeing a result. I'm feeling a little bit more at peace. I feel a little bit better in my body. The pounds are coming off. And you know what? This is equaling happiness for me. And let me just preface this whole conversation by saying, I don't feel that every person who carries extra weight has a problem. I did. But I'm not the person here saying, I'm not fat shaming people. I'm not saying people have to lose weight at all. I'm just saying that my level of overweight was so restrictive to my well-being. From a health standpoint, I was painful. I wasn't going out. It was a problem for me. That's a me statement. So, when I started to lose weight and feel like I was more mobile and I was feeling like maybe going and checking out some live music, these were really novel things for me. And I so enjoyed saying yes. And that was the big payoff. So I think your original question was about shame. I think what happened was the success and the way that I started to feel positive about my choices blocked out the shame.
And that's a beautiful thing, because we can really carry that like a blanket, like a heavy coat, can't we?
Like a wet blanket.
Yeah. I was also thinking about self-sabotage.
Mm-hmm.
Was that something that you also had to face in your journey.
Definitely. I absolutely kept myself back by eating. And there were times when I would say that was even intentional, like I knew it and I didn't change it. And it was this sort of, who cares anyway feeling. The negative self-talk would go. And then I'd also say things to myself like, you're meant to be fat. You're not meant to be happy this lifetime. You're not meant to you're unlovable. Like all these huge things. And the other thing I have to say is, if you catch yourself saying something to yourself in your head that you would never say to another human being, please take a hard stop and think in that moment about a different way that you can relate to yourself. Because I ultimately heard what I was saying to myself. It was a horror nightmare. I would say things to myself constantly that I would never dream of even thinking about another person, let alone saying. Yet I had this constant dialogue going on in my head that was all negative. So the sabotaging was easy, because if I listened to that person in my head, of course you shouldn't succeed. Of course you're a failure. Of course you're going to stay home. Of course you're going to be fat. Of course you're not going to go out. That was all in perfect alignment. The premise was nuts. The premise was completely invalid. But boy, I built that house out of brick. And I think I had to unbuild it piece by piece. And I didn't do that intentionally. It sort of happened as I started to replace those thoughts with, I remember even accepting for a moment that I could do it. And what a feeling that was. That was like such a hopeful, butterfly, giddy feeling. Like, are you kidding me? After all these years, I might actually be able to do this. Let's see. Just that in itself, like I give myself goosebumps saying this, but to say to someone who's been severely holding themselves back in whatever way, and then to say, you know what, you have the tools right now to maybe make a new choice and do a you version 2.0. What do you think? Wow.
Is that scary too, though? I've known people that the fear and the attention drove them back to the weight. Yeah.
Yes. So I think that the reason it worked for me this time was I had that healing along with it. I had that, I had that very strong why. I had that compassion for myself, and I was firmly not going to allow this to be punishing in any sort of way. So, probably even if I failed, that wouldn't be punishing either, because I had given that piece of it up. It was so very painful that I had to. So at the very least, I was going to give that piece up. And if I failed, all right, at least, you know what? I'm human and I failed. It wasn't going to be a decision about my worthiness as a person. So I had to break it down into little steps. And I know I keep coming back to this, but that's honestly what let me do this step by step, because it's really easy to circle the drain, especially if you don't feel like you have all the tools, lean into the ones you do have, and just that one step at a time thing really, really works. And taking that breath, if you're lucky enough to realize that you're acting in a pattern, and you start to break that pattern down and you realize it, boy, that moment around the choice, if you can stretch that out and make that last a little bit longer so that you are thinking about your next move instead of just doing your next move out of habit, boy, there's so much power in there. And the other thing I want to say about fear is, if you're a driver, put fear in the passenger seat, let them come on the ride. Have them put their seatbelt on, sit right next to you in the passenger seat. Come on, come right along with me. But you're not driving today. I am. And my feeling is, if you're in the car long enough, you go to a rest stop and you let them get out and you take off.
I like it.
So it's and I don't feel the fear and do it anyway. That seems to be a little bit dismissive of the fear. The fear can be debilitating. What I'm suggesting is we don't have to know how to unravel the fear. We don't have to pretend the fear's not there. And we can even spend a day or two being held back by the fear. But at some point, we have to invite the fear to sit next to us and take them for a ride. But make sure that we're the driver.
Yeah.
even a little shift like that can turn things completely around.
Wow. That's amazing. So Amy, what powerful mindsets and strategies and just the power of your journey that you shared with us. If somebody listening to this, it's just, resonating in their soul. They've got that feeling, the feeling, right?
Absolutely.
Like, this is for me. This is for me. What 3 things do you want that person to really take away from your message, whether you've already said it or you're on the path to saying it? What are 3 things you really want to give to my audience today?
The first is, if you're home thinking of making a big choice in your life and not sure how to start, and you're waiting for that moment of a sign or something that mobilizes you to do it, I would say that we often overcomplicate things. And I want the person to break it down into one decision and one choice. If we can do this on the backdrop of a why, and I'm going to talk about this for just a moment, if you don't mind, because it's very, very, very important. It's important to frame the why in a positive way. For example, it was not helpful for me to say, I'm tired of being fat and ugly. I'm fat and ugly. I'm a loser and I'm fat. Okay. That seems punishing. And I don't think I want that as my mantra from my highest self. So take a little time and think about something that your highest self knows is true in the depth of your soul. That if you're walking around in this meat suit, and I firmly believe that we're not bodies, we're with spirits, that we're spirits with bodies. So if your spirit's body isn't reflecting who your spirit is on the inside, I would encourage you to spend a little bit of time with her or him and ask him, what's the highest and best for you right now? And for me, it was to make the life I want and be happy. That became my why. I loved it for 2 reasons. It's empowering. It's up to me to make the life I want. No one is going to come along here and make me happy, healthy, slim, and understand food. That's completely, no pun intended, on my plate. So that's on me. So the first answer to your question, the first thing is develop a why that's born of kindness, gentleness, and that resonates with your highest inner self. The second thing is to boil it down into one choice, because as surely as I'm sitting here sharing this with you in this amazing opportunity, I can tell you that everything I ever did boiled down to the power of one choice. I never knew how to get to the end or what the journey was going to be. But if you sit me down and ask me if I can make one decision at a time, I absolutely can. And I would say that you can too. And the third is, don't be afraid to ask for help. And that sort of help I'm talking about is, like in my case, I didn't know how to eat well. So I went and spoke with a nutritionist who helped me set up a plan. That was super helpful. I didn't know how to move my larger body. I went and worked with someone who helped me move my larger body safely and to make me feel like I can do something that doesn't end up in a back pain or laying on the bed for a week. So I sought out help when I can. And then I'm going to do a little bonus here because I feel the vibe is right. Find a love tribe. And by the love tribe, I mean the people that get you and understand you, that understand the journey that you're on, and will help you to fortify your soul so that you can get through this process as beautifully as possible, and at all times with a kindness and gentleness around it.
Those are so beautiful. And I think the underlying thought that runs through my mind as you share these things is you have to let go of the judgment for any of these things to take place.
The judgment, I really feel like the judgment completely blocks the doorway. I talk a lot in images, and forgive me, but the judge sits there to tell you how things are and how things aren't, but oftentimes doesn't give you the way through. So you know what? If you're going for a ride, put the judge in the back seat. You got fear in the passenger seat, put the judge in the back seat. We got one spot left. We'll figure out who to put in the other passenger seat in the back, but let the judge come for the ride, but you show them the ride. you take them on a tour of yourself. And if you do this from a standpoint of highest and kindest and gentlest, even the judge might soften up, because he or she will see that there's a gentleness around you, and that gentleness is always born of love, and love is always the answer.
Mm-hmm. Powerful, very powerful. Amy, how can people find you?
Contact me by all means if you'd like to reach out. It's my website is www.amyfreinberg.com, and I'll spell that. It's AMYFREINBERG.com. And my book is on Amazon. I'm so thrilled. It's called Food, Eat with Ease Every Day.
Amy, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today, for sharing your journey, for not just doing the courageous work that you did for yourself, but then stepping out and doing the courageous work of helping other people who are stuck in that same cycle. And it might not even be food. It might be something else, but how powerful is it that you found the way and you express it with such love and grace and kindness? And what a powerfully empowering message you have. And you're such a light. And I'm so grateful that you shared your message with my tribe today.
Thank you. It's been my honor and pleasure. And I see your light too. And I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you.
My pleasure. Today, friends, I've been speaking with Amy Freinberg-Trufas. She's the author of Food, Eat with Ease Every Day. And if you head to www.feminine-raodmap.com/episode 277, you will find links to Amy there. While you're there, if you scroll down to the bottom, you can add your name to my email list. I send out periodic encouraging emails. Thanks to technological challenges that I don't know how to get through at the moment, my subscribe is at the very, very bottom. When I say the bottom, just keep going. I don't know what happened. We'll figure it out. So, friends, this conversation I felt was important because there are people in my life who have shared their struggles and their discouragement. And I think anything that holds us back, whether it's food, whether it's drugs, whether it's alcohol, whether it's trauma, it's need to break through just to get out of bed. It could be depression, could be grief, anything that we're going through, we need to find that place of grace and gentleness. And often we need someone to go through it with us, who can go through it with us with grace and gentleness. And I would encourage you to take that courageous journey with gentleness and kindness, whatever it is for you. I encourage you to get a copy of Amy's book, maybe start a book club, find a way, find that sliver of light and go toward it, baby step by baby step. It does not have to change overnight. We get to decide the journey, the timing, the path. Even if we don't know the way, the next best step will at least point us in the right direction. So thank you so much for being with us today, my friends. I hope that this podcast has been impactful. And if it has, please take the time to subscribe, rate, and share this podcast. Share the resources that change your life. Share Amy's message. Let other people who need to hear her find her. Be that messenger. Thank you for being with us. We look forward to sharing more and more empowering conversations with you in the weeks to come. Take care, my friends. Bye-bye.